During the course of a single year, at least 1 in 5 people suffers a mental illness or brain disorder. What's it like to lose control of your mind? How can you find help? Join us now as patients and families tell the stories of their fight to escape the fires of the mind.
At night, you would have these terrorizing dreams. I used to be shot in the chest every night, because my partner was shot right next to me in Vietnam.
I was at a point where I thought that I was going to be like this for the rest of my life. I thought that I was going to die like this.
At my low point, I was having waves of panic and anxiety from morning until night, and I could barely go 1 block from my apartment.
Anxiety is a fear that something may go wrong with our lives. People may worry about losing a job or a relationship. Normally, when they realize a fear is imaginary, it's quickly forgotten. But some people can't let go of their anxieties because their brains won't let them. Haunted by feelings of doom, they suffer from psychiatric illnesses called anxiety disorders. Michelle Krask is an expert on these illnesses, one of the most prevalent mental health problems in the United States.
25% of the population, at least 25%, at some time in their lives are going to have one of these anxiety disorders. It's very common. And remember, being a disorder means that it's impairing. Work days lost, disability, they significantly impact family relationships, social relationships. They are on par with severe medical diseases and on par with severe depression.
Triggered by tragic events, post-traumatic stress disorder inflicts recurrent nightmares and chronic sleeping problems. Obsessive-compulsive disorders enslave their victims with endless rituals. Phobias like fear of heights can immobilize patients with irrational fears. And panic attacks can trigger heart palpitations and difficulty breathing. At the age of 24, Neil Seidman was forming his own real estate business when he experienced his first panic attack.
I walked out of my apartment, I paced around the neighborhood. My head was light, I was going to pass out, I was going to faint, I was going to die. It was the worst experience I've ever had in my life. And my condition gradually got worse. I couldn't do things that a 6-year-old could do. And to have that reality day in and day out really gradually eroded my self-esteem.
Panic attacks are a sudden rush of intense fear, a sense of dread. For the person experiencing it, it feels like suddenly realizing that there's a gun at their head and they didn't know where it came from, but they know that there's a gun at their head. An incredible, intense feeling of fear rushes through their body. So whenever we feel like danger is right in front of us, right there, we all get this rush of intense arousal. That's the fight-flight system.
The fight-or-flight response allows us to automatically confront or flee from danger. It begins in the pituitary gland. As we react to danger, special hormones are released. The hormones trigger the adrenal glands to produce a rush of adrenaline that speeds up the heart. The liver releases massive amounts of glucose for extra energy, and all the senses become keener, ready to deal with any threat.
Now, in panic attacks, it's the same fight-flight, but it's happening for no reason.
I was driving on the Santa Monica Freeway, and I had a panic attack. A few days later, I had a near panic on another freeway. So to avoid panic, I stopped going on any freeway. At my low point, I was having waves of panic and anxiety from morning until night, and I could barely go 1 block from my apartment.
Neil Seidman's condition grew steadily worse. His fear of panic attacks became so overwhelming, he developed a condition known as panic disorder.
Panic disorder is when the person starts to live a life of being afraid of fear. They start to dwell on when is that panic attack going to happen again. They start to avoid places where they think it could happen, or dread places where it could happen. It becomes all-consuming. This is what their life becomes.
I remember one time a friend asked me, "Neil, what things can't you do?" And I said, this will be a much shorter conversation if I just tell you the things that I can do.
Neil's fear of panic attacks became so all-consuming, he was barely able to leave his apartment, a condition known as agoraphobia, or fear of open spaces. A wide range of phobias are connected to anxiety. Some involve a fear of animals. The mere sight of an ordinary dog can trigger heart palpitations and dizziness. At UCLA, the leading expert on anxiety disorders is Dr. Alexander Bistritsky.
I have seen patients in the middle of the city who are afraid of snakes. And they're afraid of snakes to such degree that they're afraid to go out of their houses. For example, they watch television and they flip channels and suddenly there is a program on snakes and they have a severe emotional reaction. They start having heart palpitations, they feel faint, and they just don't want to face it.
Cognitive behavior therapy allows patients to confront their fears and change their response.
You remember Fred from our earlier sessions. On a 0 to 8, where would you place your anxiety right now? What are you feeling?
I'd say a 7 right now.
A little nervous?
It's a little different than actually just looking at the cage. I mean,
After several sessions like these, a patient's irrational fears often begin to disappear.
Why don't you, when you feel comfortable, take a couple of steps forward to the cage and see if you can just do what you've already done the other day and just stand here next to Fred, next to me. How are you feeling right now?
I'm a little nervous.
You're nervous? Okay. How do you feel about me touching Fred right now? How do you respond to that?
Not as bad as the thought of me doing it, but I'm not totally comfortable with it.
Touch Fred.
Patients are desensitized to the objects of their phobias.
Right now, you want me to do it?
While caution around snakes is smart, the irrational fear is cured.
Excellent.
A variation of this technique would help set Neil Seidman free. After spending 3 years as a virtual prisoner in his own neighborhood, Neil's agoraphobia, or fear of the outside world, was finally diagnosed.
Getting the diagnosis changed my life because it started to get me in touch with some of the amazing resources that are available.
So what I want you to do is just allow yourself to relax back. That's right.
Neil's first step was learning to relax through meditation. He then found a psychologist who specialized in treating his disorder, Ron Brooks.
My message to him was that the goal of treatment is to help him go anywhere, do anything, without panic attacks.
Brooks used cognitive behavioral therapy to help Neil work through his fears in stages. To get his life back, Brooks told Neil he'd have to get back behind the wheel.
It took me 3 months to extend my range from my apartment in Santa Monica to Sunset and Vine in Hollywood, which is about 16 miles. When I got to Sunset and Vine, that was a huge milestone.
A second milestone was driving to Dr. Brooks' office some 25 miles away.
Small dose.
But Neil's victory was marred by a fear that at any moment he'd grow dizzy and pass out while driving.
Okay, let's stand up for a second. Okay, and we're going to breathe deeply together. The idea is to help you feel dizzy, all right?
Just like some patients confront their fear of snakes, Neil exposes himself to his fear of passing out.
It's very good. Okay, your level of anxiety on a 0 to 10 scale?
About a 6.
Great. I'd like you to try walking heel to toe.
By deliberately getting dizzy, Neil learns not to fear it.
I felt dizzy, but I seemed to be able to walk fine.
Okay, so even though you felt dizzy, your balance and coordination was just fine. How would this be if you're dizzy while driving then?
Well, I guess I could drive the car still.
Through the therapy, Neil expanded his safe zone up the California coastline.
I drove 100 miles to Santa Barbara with absolutely no anxiety. A few days later, I packed up my car, headed out from Santa Monica, my destination being Oakland to visit my parents. And this is about 500 miles. About halfway to Oakland, I felt peace and safety that I'd never felt in my entire life. I knew that I had achieved my cure. I continued up to Oakland. I surprised my parents, which was one of the highlights of my life. So I decided I was going to drive 1,000 miles north and then 1,000 miles east, so my safe zone would be 1 million square miles. And I did.
In the final stages of treatment, he kind of took off on his own. I told him to go driving, and next thing I knew, I was getting postcards from all over the United States.
Nearly anyone with Neil's disorder can win back their world, but they have to seek treatment first. Recently, imaging techniques have revealed circuits in the brain that are active in anxiety disorders. The orbital frontal cortex, the caudate nucleus, and the thalamus are all connected by a circuit of nerves. The circuit's job is to assess danger and then order the body to take action. The caudate nucleus acts like an automatic transmission that puts the survival circuit in motion. This circuit can also doom its victims to lives of endless rituals in one of anxiety's most dramatic variations, obsessive-compulsive disorder.
It literally is the brain getting locked up with the error detection circuitry in the front of the brain getting locked in gear by an automatic transmission that's stuck. On the one hand, people get the feeling that something is dirty, something is contaminated, so it needs to be washed or cleaned. The other large group of symptoms are involving checking. And in those symptoms, people get the feeling that something needs to be closed down, fixed, made right. Although they basically know that nothing really is wrong because they know they basically washed this thing, they've checked this thing, it's clean, it's okay. The problem is that since their brain keeps sending the false message, they keep getting bombarded with this feeling. And what they do out of basically desperation to make this terrible feeling go away, they tend to do the thing that their brain is telling them to do, namely check again and again.
Over 5 million of us suffer from the disabling rituals of obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. Dr. Schwartz and Dr. Ida Gorbis are innovators in the treatment of OCD.
The goal is for them to be able to separate themselves from OCD and say, this is not really me. This is the neurological disorder. It is called OCD. But it does take a little.
In group therapy, patients retrain their response to obsessive thoughts in a 4-step process.
You know that.
First, it's relabel, call it what it really is, an obsession. 2, reattribute, know what's really causing it. 3 is refocus, do another behavior, work around it. And the 4th step is revalue, because when you do a healthy behavior in response to the obsessive thought and urge, you can not only change your behavioral responses, you can change the very brain chemistry that's causing the problem in the first place. So it was strong. I mean, it just happened to be
and
a
it's
strong
very rare it gets that strong anymore.
Yeah, because last time.
This patient has an obsessive fear of injuring pedestrians with her car.
I just had a driving incident where I felt like I went over this thing in the road, and it was a big bump. And usually I can just go on, or I might have a fleeting thought, I just hit somebody.
Right.
But then I tell myself, oh well, what would Dr. Gorbis say to do? And I just keep going, and then after a while I forget about it.
Right.
And before the program, I would have been dwelling on it, and I probably would have gone back more than once.
As soon as you get that thought, maybe I ran someone over, that's when you want to really say, that's an obsession.
You were giving into the compulsion, okay? And OCD is insatiable. Every time you give in, it becomes stronger. But you were able to identify it, okay? You did give into the compulsion, and don't really blame yourself, when you do. Because it's like Dr. Schwartz very often says, it's a bad brain day. It's just because
Obsessive-compulsive disorder can reach tragic proportions if left untreated. A classic case involved one of America's most brilliant personalities. Multi-billionaire Howard Hughes was a motion picture producer, aviator, and industrialist in the 1930s and 40s. It's widely believed that at the height of his career, Hughes fell prisoner to OCD. Obsessed with imaginary germs and infections, he hired an army of servants to shield himself from contamination.
Hughes literally got to the point where his contamination obsession was so intense that he started to literally believe, that light carried germs.
this was the man who could just afford absolutely anything and everything in life. And he thought that by hiring more help to serve his OCD, that he was escaping it or he was making it better.
And it ended up killing him. That's how he ended up living in a little room with no light, not being able to eat. Because OCD does not stop when you give in to it.
Hughes' OCD involved an intense fear of contamination, a fate shared by Robert Barnett. Robert's condition went undiagnosed for 10 years. In the meantime, his obsessive-compulsive disorder put a tremendous strain on those who loved him.
This just messed everything up. I mean, it just was horrible. It was really horrible.
And again, probably the last 2 years and definitely the last 6 months, it escalated so greatly that I didn't want to be with my son.
The Barnetts live in suburban New Jersey. Robert believed his entire house was contaminated, and his parents and brothers were spreading the contamination everywhere they went.
From day one, things started getting contaminated, and then by people living in the house and not knowing the situation, they would, without even knowing it, they were contaminating every item for me.
I thought I could solve the problem by cleaning everything. Well, I'll just take something, I'll go, show me, I'll scrub it. But he said that's not it, it's not dirt.
Even the simplest things were 2-3 times as hard for me because of these rituals I had to go through.
Simply leaving the house set in motion a series of decontamination rituals that began in the shower.
I had clothes that I couldn't even keep them in my dresser in my room. They had to either stay in the dryer or folded on top. Usually the top layer I didn't want to use because I figured someone probably brushed into them. So it was kind of like my buffer to the clean clothes.
Any item that touched a contaminated area had to be re-washed, or Robert would suffer tremendous anxiety.
I had to be very careful not to bump into his clothes, which were like this high, or reach over into the cabinets and grab something. And if something fell out of the closet, I couldn't let him know because it would be he'd be so upset.
I'd go into the bathroom and start to use the toiletries. I would use the deodorant, put it back, wash my hands. Brush my teeth, put it back, wash my hands. If I use gel, you pick up the bottle, you put it in, you rinse that hand off, so now you can put it in your hair because you don't want to contaminate your hair. Take out a brush, kind of rinse it off so that it's not contaminated from in the drawer. Brush your hair. When you put that away, you wash your hands anyway again. Finally get to the point where you can put your shirt on and grab your jacket and get ready to go out the door. I would open the door, make sure it didn't blow shut with the wind, wash my hands. Walk through and push the door closed with my foot.
As Robert's condition worsened, he withdrew from his family. He lost his girlfriend, his apartment, and a series of jobs. Meanwhile, his father feared for his son's life.
It got progressively worse to a point of desperation. And my fear was that if we couldn't find help quickly for him, I wasn't certain about what he was capable of doing in harming himself. He's very impulsive, and it scared me.
It wasn't something that I had planned to do, but I had realized that I had a razor, a box cutter, within reach, and I just grabbed it and I actually cut across my wrist. And when the skin opened up, I cut again.
Robert survived his suicide attempt by rushing to a nearby hospital. But clearly his life was still in danger.
We just were watching his life slip away, literally. And as parents, it was obviously terribly frustrating on our part. And we were really desperate when he went out to California.
Unable to find a good OCD program in his area, Robert traveled to Los Angeles. Here he joined the treatment program run by Jeff Schwartz and Ida Gorbis.
We're going to do an in vivo exposure with grape jelly. And what I would like you to do is to just touch this sticky substance, just a little, yeah, and tell me how much is your anxiety.
In this session, Robert resists the compulsion to wash his hands.
Father comes in.
To test him further, Gorbis plays a tape designed to trigger his contamination anxiety.
It's been a wonderful.
In it, his father, who Robert believes is contaminated, suddenly arrives in Los Angeles.
He reaches out and he hugs you. Inside, you shrink. You begin to feel anxiety rise. You begin to feel constriction in your chest. you begin to gasp for air. It is 1 second too late. His hands were contaminated.
On a scale of 1 to 10, Robert rates his level of anxiety as a 2, the first real victory over OCD.
After a week and a half of the program, I forget that I have contaminated everything in the hotel room. Just go ahead and touch everything, it's okay.
How does it feel to you to be able to do these simple things?
I do cross my legs. Now I'm able to touch my shoes, and I purposely have been doing that more because I never was able to cross my legs and hold my sneaker, and I almost got jealous when I saw other people do that.
Next, Robert tries a more difficult test. Items he considers highly contaminated are mailed to him from home.
Okay. I asked him to send some tapes out. There's an area in downstairs by one of the TVs and VCR. So I asked him to send a couple of tapes out because I knew that area was pretty contaminated.
Once, just touching the shipping box would have triggered intense waves of anxiety for Robert.
If this would have, again, been in the past, I would have freaked out. I probably would have wanted to just right now find a different hotel room and before I actually let it touch everything. The next huge step would be to actually go back to the house. That would be the final test, I guess.
After 6 weeks of treatment, Rob returns to New Jersey. What was once a sea of contamination has become a home again.
It's a week ago yesterday, and from the minute he walked in the house, it was miraculous, the change. He was able to do things that he hadn't been able to do for years, things that I never thought he'd be able to do again.
Even my closet, I can actually have my regular clothes and stuff in the closet and not have to worry about if I pull something out, does it have to get washed before I wear it. Now it's, just like anybody else would use.
It's a big relief now that I've been back home, and I want to stay in the house for another week or two to make sure it's part of the therapy for me to, stay here, make sure everything's cool, but so far everything's been fine.
Soon Robert will move back into his own apartment and look for a job. He can even take his mom and dad for a ride in his truck for the very first time.
I don't know how much time each day, or if you add that up, how many hours, days, weeks, months. I don't know how much time I've wasted of my life just working on these compulsions. And I think I have my life back.
Stress, combined with a family history of the disorder, can increase the odds of developing OCD. Recently, an additional risk factor emerged: a childhood infection that begins with strep throat. In rare cases, Streptococcus bacteria can damage a region of the brain called the striatum, part of the circuit responsible in OCD. Following a case of strep throat, 13-year-old Chris Duran developed a series of obsessions that began with the fear of choking to death.
I used to start carrying water bottles with me, just in a bag. Sometimes I'd keep it in my pocket, just to make sure that I don't, because what happened, I thought that if I didn't have something to drink, I'd choke.
Chris's mother Liz saw other obsessions develop, rituals that affected every phase of his son's life.
Christopher had a safe and odd number thing, and he would only take his showers on his safe days. His safe days, which related to the numbers, were Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. He would only shower at 8:30 at night and 10:30 at night. If he missed it, he'd have to skip 2, so he wouldn't shower again till the following Tuesday. Well, his rituals took so long. When he would shower at 10, his last shower was at 10:30 at night. He'd end up going to bed at 3 in the morning, and we'd have to get up at 5:30, and enough time to get him up to do his rituals to get to work and school.
I would usually go to the mirror. I had a little head shaking thing. That would take 40 minutes, maybe to an hour, just to finish doing a little maneuver.
Before leaving the bedroom, Chris had to perform a foot sliding ritual that eventually caused his toes to bleed.
And in school, when I would make him a lunch, he would only eat on his safe days. He would only eat lunch if it was away from the house on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, he wouldn't eat.
As his rituals intensified, his schoolwork and sports began to suffer.
I loved playing football. Basketball I loved it. I used to love playing in grammar school.
When he had to quit basketball, that was the hardest thing, because he came to me and he said, "Mom," he said, "I wanted to cry." He said, "But I knew I couldn't do it because school was already getting hard for him because he couldn't concentrate anymore. He couldn't do his work."
One of Chris's teachers is Rudy Herrera.
I didn't know there was a problem until probably 9 weeks into the year. I'd be walking around checking everybody's work, and Chris's penmanship is beautiful. And at the end of the class, I'd be grading the stuff, in my office, and Chris's paper wasn't in the stack. And it turns out that Chris had to keep most of his homework because it wasn't perfect enough.
The odd numbers were bad numbers, and the even numbers were good numbers. I thought if I was to use the even number, I would be safe. When I would take a test, I knew the answer. I would know it. But it was so strong that the even numbers like 2 and 4, I thought those had to be what I had to put down, because if I didn't, that I would choke. Leaving school was really hard. That was another tough ritual I had to do. I had to slide my foot, but it was on a crack, on every crack.
And he'd be doing this maybe 2.5 hours a day after school. So we get out at 3:30, so he'd be here till about 6.
Until it felt right, I would continue to do it over and over. After walking through this path, it would take me a good 2 hours. Until the gate, I'd have to get into the car, and that would take me a good 20 minutes.
As Chris's OCD intensified, his mother began a desperate search for professional help.
His world was getting smaller and smaller. He didn't want to go to school anymore.
I was at a point where I thought that I was going to be like this for the rest of my life. I thought that I was going to die like this. I didn't want to live no more.
There was a time when we would go driving, and I would think to myself, it was so bad, I would think to myself, if we were killed in a car accident, that would be okay, because I thought he'd be at peace, and I'd be at peace.
By the time he was finally diagnosed, Chris's life was nearly consumed by OCD.
Before we actually go pick him up.
Under the care of Ida Gorbis, he responded well to individual and group therapy.
And then we'll go to Grandma's house after. Chris is back. And to see him play again, to see him be able to sit down, do his homework, shower whenever he wants. Silly little things like that is like, oh my God, I'm so happy. Now we can go on. We have our life.
Today, Chris's OCD is under control through the same program that saved Rob Barnett and others. He wants other kids to have the same chance to get well.
The reason why I wanted to be on this film is because I wanted to help people out, and to show them that they can still that they can still do it and to never give up. Because I went through a lot. And to find out that I finally have my life back, it's just, I really appreciate that, because the OCD was very hard for me. And I'm coming on here because I want to help people out. I want to tell them that there's always hope.
In panic attacks and phobias, individuals are plagued by fears that generally have no basis in reality. But there is one form of anxiety disorder triggered by very real-life events. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, causes patients to relive the torment of traumatic incidents, large and small. At some time in their lives, roughly 50% of Americans will be exposed to traumatic events that include natural and man-made disasters. Following their exposure to trauma, up to 8% of these people develop PTSD. Veterans of military combat are especially hard hit. The Veterans Administration's National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder is dedicated to PTSD research and treatment. Fred Gussman is the director.
It's not difficult to recognize post-traumatic stress disorder because usually the person will be behaving in a way that's not the norm for them. For example, they'll be irritable more so than in the past. Possibly hypervigilant, which means they have a tendency to get startled with certain noises that maybe relate to whatever experience they were exposed to. An increased use of alcohol to sort of numb out or suppress, if you will, the experience, the feelings that maybe keep coming back, the memories. Trauma has been around for eons. It's not something new, but we've never really understood it the way we do today. Vietnam was the first time really that we heard the cries of people saying something's wrong with me and I don't feel the same and I don't have the same joys, I don't have the same interests.
The government estimates that 30% of all Vietnam veterans will succumb to post-traumatic stress disorder. Today, at least 500,000 have been diagnosed. In the Army, Raul Corona was point man of his squad, the person who moves ahead, looking for the enemy. Raul's PTSD was triggered by the death of a less experienced soldier he'd taken under his wing.
We were going out on ambush patrols and we got about 25 yards out and big explosion. And we rushed over, of course, to set up a defense. And I could hear him moaning, and I went over. I probably shouldn't. I went over and I saw him. And the point man, this leg was all mutilated.
That day in Vietnam would haunt Raul for the rest of his life. After the war, Raul married and started a family. Within a year, it became obvious to his wife, Alicia, that her husband had a drinking problem.
I'd always deny it. I'd get drunk the next day, I'd act like nothing. There was nothing.
And the things that he would say while he was under the influence were all related to Vietnam. And so, you know, I knew the problem was Vietnam, with his experiences there and him suffering from that.
Raul's fits of anger and alcohol abuse soon threatened to alienate his family.
I kept having nightmares and flashbacks and thought they'd go away, but they just kept getting worse.
There was a lot of times that I had to make him realize that he was at home and, you know, where he was and that he was safe.
Recurring nightmares associated with PTSD are an extremely troubling symptom for many patients.
Okay, the recording started.
Veteran volunteers are helping sleep researchers at the National Center to study the problem. A portable device records brain waves and sleep disturbances for 2 days as patients go about their lives.
And we'll bring up your wave.
By discovering in which stage of sleep nightmares occur, new drugs and therapies will be developed to reduce frightening dreams. Other volunteers have exposed themselves to footage from the Vietnam War, giving researchers a glimpse of areas in the brain affected in PTSD. Brain imaging reveals an increase in blood flow to a part of the limbic system that alerts us to danger, the amygdala. If the danger is not a real threat, this alarm system is switched off by a region in the frontal cortex. In PTSD, the system remains on, and patients like Raul suffer painful bouts of distress. After years of struggle, the former soldier who risked his life for others now became his own worst enemy.
I just doubled up extension cord and put a little 3-foot ladder underneath myself and looped around my neck and kicked the ladder out of the way. My 5-year-old came in and he said that he was going to save me, so I realizing, I seen him coming, I was starting to cough already. He pushed the ladder back underneath my feet.
His son gave him a second chance at life, and Raul took action. He joined Vietnam vets from across the country for an 8-week treatment program at the National PTSD Center. Raul's group includes Vietnam vet Bill Shubin. Shubin works as a nurse in a busy New Mexico hospital. He suffers intense anxiety when surgeons use cauterization to close incisions.
And that smell that comes off of that is the same that would be the smell from bodies being burnt in napalm. And I would go back to Vietnam because we used the napalm. And the bodies would be there burnt and smoking and this stink.
Bill's PTSD cost him his marriage. He hasn't seen his family for 10 years. Meanwhile, his flashbacks to Vietnam combat continue to take their toll.
I'm still in the operating room, but I'm back in Vietnam. I'm in the operating room, I'm back in Vietnam. I have a difficult time distinguishing the two. And I finally, I felt I never came home.
After 8 weeks of work, the group has completed therapy. While there is still no cure for PTSD, these veterans have learned to recognize the enemy and minimize its hold on them.
I've met some real heroes. And these are you guys are not only heroes from the war, but heroes of life. And I've learned a lot from you and the feelings that went behind that.
I have learned all that I can from this program. Now I must take it out into community and work with it in order to better myself in my future endeavors.
I still have a future. I still have my grandchildren that I can look forward to, and there's a lot still to live for.
He's a different person. It's the best thing that could have happened. I just wish it had happened much earlier.
sure we're going to keep seeing.
Irrational fears, physical discomforts, sleep disruption, and substance abuse are just a few of the symptoms of anxiety disorders. Recognizing them is the first crucial step to recovery. Those who have shared their stories with us took the vital second step. They found treatments that worked. They only wish they had found them sooner.
The anxiety and the panic was center stage for the next 5 years. And my condition gradually got worse. I developed a condition that now I know was agoraphobia, but it took 3 years before I got the right diagnosis.
The good news is that the treatments for anxiety disorders do work. Anywhere from 70 to 85% do very well. So well that they're not panicking and they're able to live their lives without impairment. The difficulty is that only about 11% of the population who are suffering actually get these treatments. That's the problem.
Everyone thought I had a perfect life, and no one knew how much I was struggling and how I would have given anything to exchange lives with just about anybody else I met. Because I didn't know anybody for the longest time who had OCD.
I never knew that I was going to get over it, really. I mean, you can't get over OCD. I mean, it's always going to be there, but you can control it.
I feel at peace with myself. Finally, I've come to accept myself for who I am and what I've done.